Off to the MC, Chris Deerdorf.
So not professional behind the closed doors. Welcome everybody to our commercial panel discussion. Introductions from the right. We got Melissa McCullough. Some of you may know her as Melissa Mueller, right? That's her on-screen name. And she's with, we'll have you come back to that. To her right is Justin Hovetter. We all know Justin, broker extraordinaire. To his right is Barb
This is what you're
Cartwright.
here for? Are you here for the training?
Yes. So welcome everybody. If Justin, if you could hand the microphone to Melissa there first. Thank you. If you can just tell us who you are, what your background is, like a 30-second commercial. Thank you.
Sure. Melissa McCullough. McCullough's my maiden name. Some people know me as Mueller. I'm with Marvel Loans. I do commercial lending and I'm a broker. So we shop around different lenders all over the country to find the best solution for your borrower. We like to provide a lot of options. I've been in lending. This is year 5 for me. Prior to this, I sold software for commercial real estate. If you've heard of LoopNet, it's like the Zillow, but for commercial properties, and CoStar. That's actually how I met Justin. I know there's a love-hate relationship with CoStar and LoopNet, but learned a lot and love just networking and being a resource for my partners. So that's what I'm here for.
Hi, I'm Justin. I met met Melissa many years ago whenever she did work for the Evil Empire, and she did a great job of it. But her strength is those relationships, and we reconnected years later. Whenever she told me about her ability to make loans happen in the commercial world without a relationship, because so many of the loans in the commercial world happen because of a pre-existing relationship.
Hi, I'm Barbara Cartwright, and I'm not an alcoholic. So hopefully my partner Rick and I here can help clear up a few things on. I heard that. Should have added that. Anyway, that we could help with anything that you guys need or any questions, or even if you're going to learn how to do it. Okay.
I don't think I need this. Anyhow, my name's Rick McGinnis. Okay. I'm sorry. I've been in the business since 2006. I started with Bennett Williams in the commercial realm. I never did residential real estate. So I was with Bennett for about 7 years. Then I worked with a couple other smaller brokerages heading up their commercial departments, and decided we should come here. Justin wooed us and came here close to a year ago. So hopefully we can answer some of your questions today about the commercial side of things.
We're going to start with you. Question number 1.
Yes.
What skill set do you need to be able to represent commercial clients?
I think primarily patience. The problem with commercial real estate, it takes a long time for transactions to go through. I mean, you can get lucky and you can get a building, brick and mortar, and of course move those in a matter of months. But most of what we do seems to be along the development side of things. So consequently, you have to be analytical about it. It's certainly a lot different than selling a house because there's multiple uses for these properties sometimes. You got to look at a property and find out what its highest and best use might be. You got to be creative. You got to understand analytical skills. So look at a property and try to determine, maybe an adaptive reuse for it. And then when you get into land and things of that nature, that's a whole different ballpark there, because you have to look at zoning, you have to look at environmental issues, you have to look at topo, you have to look at location for the property, which is obviously you look at that in residential as well. But all the other uses and things of that nature you have to take in consideration.
To add to that, what other skill sets would you need for commercial?
As Rick had said, the analysis of the property that you're trying to do is the biggest thing, and your research. Research is a lot more in depth than you do with a house. This is where you take a piece of property, or as a lot of people do in commercial, they'll drive past an area and they'll say, you know what this area needs? Or, you know, you look at a strip center, for example, and it's half dead or whatever. Do your research, find out the owners. It's a little difficult when they're buried in LLCs, but that's where a lot of your companies that you work with will help you with that. But there's several different ways you can get around that before you have to do that. I find out because we have our membership with CoStar. I call our contact and said, I need you to dig deeper and find out who this is, how I get in touch with them, and what I can do. And emails, whatever it is. And generally they do it. Sometimes it takes them a little time, but they do it, which is why we have to pay an exorbitant amount of money every month.
On top of all that, I'd say just being very detail oriented and meticulous about it. And by meticulous, I mean, don't skip over a step because you think you know the answer, because that's the part that'll bite you.
Just flexibility. Things can change constantly once you find out more information. And then if you're working with an investor, just making sure that they're organized. That's half the battle on the loan side. They don't know where their LLC docs are.
Right.
So Melissa, can you provide some examples of challenges that commercial real estate agents come upon that residential may not necessarily?
I feel like you touched on a lot of this, just doing the research, right? Knowing exactly, you talked about that, Rick, highest and best use of the property, and redeveloping it, you know, what could go into this property and what are the rents going to be, and doing that research of knowing. That's half the battle. I feel like on the lending side is that, you know, what you think the rents are going to be is not what the actual rents are going to be. And so then that can totally kill the deal.
Where do you go to find that?
What information?
All the research that you have to do?
Yeah, my question is, where do you go to find that information about rents and all that?
You know, one of the perks that you do. Oh, sorry. CoStar, Crexie, your contacts that you have there. There's ways of doing that. You run your reports, you have to do your comps. And the one thing about commercial is with residential, to get estimated rents and things, you have a limited space that you can do. You can only go within approximately 6 miles. With commercial, you can go as far as you have to make something work. But you better make sure that that's something that's going to be necessary in that particular area.
Time's going to be different too. You can go back further in time, and market participants, not just, you know, the people who are aggregating data, but like if you know an appraiser, develop that relationship. But what were we talking about? Oh, challenges that you might not face in residential real estate. Trying to foresee how one decision or one change on a property can affect everything else. Like changing of a use, right? We're talking about adaptive reuse on a property. Will that be allowed on, you know, by zoning? Are you going to require a traffic study for that change in use? You know, like all these different things that are going to come into play just because of the, you know, the law of unintended consequences, right? That was written by a commercial broker.
Townships will also change the zoning while you have a property listed and not realize it because they don't always notify the owners.
Yeah, and well, when it comes to the zoning change, it could be a real nightmare. We're going through one right now with a particular township, but some of the other things too are big items that in our realm is stormwater management. I mean, if you have, I think, over 2 acres, you have to get the DEP involved and get an NPDES permit, which is not an easy thing to do. They're understaffed as it is. So these things take time. All this stuff is just, this is nothing you have to deal with a residential unit. You don't have to worry about where your stormwater goes. I think environmental challenges, you know, you have to find out where the old burn pit is on the farm that you're selling, because it's going to be, you know, full of who knows what. topo challenges. You know, can you put this? You're gonna have to put a big retaining wall on this property to make it adapt to you know, 1 million square foot building, for example. So there's a lot of little things, as Justin said earlier, the devil's in the details when it comes to commercial.
So, Rick,
Yeah.
how do your marketing strategies for commercial properties differ? How's it different when you go to market a property as opposed to selling a house? What do you go through?
Obviously the MLS does, I think down here in York area, the MLS is Bright is used a lot more by the commercial people than up in our area in Harrisburg, Cumberland County. I don't think we get many leads whatsoever from that. We do put our properties on there, but so we use LoopNet, CoStar, Brevitas, Crexi, CREXI. The latter two, the last two, Brevitas and Crexi, you can have a free membership there, but it doesn't give you much. But the LoopNet and CoStar, Barb works them much more than I do. She says, you know, you have to do your research. I call Barb for those comps and so forth, and we'll get what the market rates are for apartments and so forth. And but yeah, that's primarily what we use is the commercial sites, and they're ridiculously expensive. The LoopNet CoStar has a pretty much monopoly on commercial resources.
They got apartments.com. They just took over the one that was hotels. I don't remember the name of it, but it was specifically for hotels. They just bought that. So, I'm sorry.
Oh, Zillow's tiny compared to what CoStar. CoStar's gonna take over
CoStar's-
residential.
CoStar's worldwide.
Homes.com.
Yeah, they have that too. Yeah. It's like they're becoming a monopoly, but nobody will stop them because they're not based here in the United States. So that kind of prevents that little law there. But yes, your research is the most important thing, and be prepared if you want to get into commercial. It's expensive because that alone is costing us like $1,000 a month. Just that's not even the marketing. That's just having that thing because we desperately do need it. We have to have them. And if you have some really good commercial clients that you're going to start working with, they're going to expect you to have that because they know it. So that's the biggest thing, but you really do need it because it is the best thing for you to do your research.
We brought Barb a stack of mail from the Carlisle office that she had forgotten to pick up, but it was postcards from people trying to advertise properties. So the commercial marketing machine is much different than what the residential is. I want you to think, has anyone here tried to rent a residential rental to market? Has anyone tried to find a residential rental? What was the obstacle in that endeavor? Is that there's no centralized marketplace for it. Everybody has their own avenue for finding or marketing those properties. Brokers, commercial brokers, you know, you have to check them all to be sure that you got them all, right? Because they don't have a obligation to cooperate. So you're going to check NAI, you're going to check Bennett Williams, you're going to check Landmark, and then you'll also check the MLS. You'll also check apartments, Crexi. You're going to check them all because there's no central clearinghouse for everything. And that's one of the challenges for the consumer and somebody trying to break into that because you don't know where the bodies are buried. No.
Does carrying the designation of realtor as a commercial agent matter? This could be a question for Justin.
I thought we all had to belong to NAR.
If you work for a realtor shop, then you do have to belong. But there are plenty of commercial brokers out there who are not realtors. So, and that's something that the associations are trying to break in. And you know, they're trying to bring that to commercial realty, and there's some resistance there.
Back when we were expanding and opening all of our brokerages, I couldn't go onto Bright. I could, but I think out of the 7 locations we opened, 5 of them were not listed on Bright or any other MLS. They were all commercial through Crexi or Landmark, and that's how we found our locations. This particular location in York was on the MLS, but most of them are not. So good point. Thank you. Any other marketing or strategies?
One other thing to add, I think residential properties are required to go on to right away, right? I mean, you have to put them on there, right? So you have this one clearinghouse. The other thing that commercial brokers do a lot of times is they put their listings in their pocket. Yeah, and I mean, that's the most frustrating thing. When you see a building and you try to find out who's managing it, then you call the owner, and then all of a sudden you get a phone call from Bill Gladstone telling you that's his listing. So you got to keep that in mind too, that it's hard to find what's available, just period, aside from doing the things that Justin was talking about.
Go to Melissa. And what factors influence the valuation of a property?
Oh man, this is an appraiser question. What factors? Of course, the rents, that's a big piece. Obviously other comparables. I don't even know if I can answer this question. And well,
Income, location, condition.
And that is if it's an investment property. If you got an owner user, you'll have a different story then. As an owner user, your rates are going to be slightly different. So many of your people that are going to be owner users, maybe just in a portion of an office building, for example, you tell them they must talk to their tax person. That's a very important thing because they try to ask you, is this going to be a tax deduction for me? You're talking to the wrong person. I'm sorry. Call the IRS or call your CPA, one or the other. But yes, your rate is different, even if they're going to be an owner user, as opposed to someone that is going to be just renting it out as a tenant.
I've got an interesting illustration. Do you guys know there was like 130 acres south on 81 near Shippensburg that's owned by the Bicycle Company? Yeah, perfect for a warehouse. Why hasn't it sold for a warehouse? Because to access this property, you have to go over a bridge, which the traffic for someone to put a 1 million square foot warehouse there, they're going to have to realign intersections and swap out bridges. So the value of that property is dictated on externalities, which are totally not related to the property itself. Things that are totally separate from the property are influencing the value of that property. And that's one of the tricks. Right.
Yes. And they'll require a red light then, which then will cost the potential buyer.
For more lanes, or they'll have to realign an off ramp from 81. That just went from,
that sounds stressful.
that's stressing me out.
There's a property in Gettysburg that actually is part of it is still one big parcel. We have part of it under contract that we hope and pray that will be closing very shortly. It's only taken a couple of years. Anyway, so there's things you have to be prepared for, but to get to the other part of the same parcel number, it's divided by Route 15. To get to that other portion, you have to go on an easement, and the listing agent will not tell you who owns the easement. And they won't tell you unless you have an agreed contract to buy that portion of it. So we want to talk about complications. It's all one deed. It's a total of 82 acres, is it? 82 acres. Your buyer's only buying 58 acres. The seller is going to do the subdivision before you go to settlement, which is land development, so it takes 2-3 years. Okay. If the person wants the rest of it that they don't want, you have to go through the listing agent again and have an agreed contract on that additional 30 acres of land. And then maybe he will tell you who owns the easement, which will be a separate payment.
Did he tell you how much that would be?
No.
So
You can't tell because they're buried in LLCs. That's another issue. That's the problem. And some of them are buried so deeply, you could end up with 5, maybe even 6 LLCs that are going to be conjoined with other properties. Figure it out. Then call me and then I'll start laughing.
So obviously zoning's a big issue. I like to, once I get the property under control, if you can, I like to meet with the township and ask them what they have in mind for this property. Because a lot of times they do. And they'll make it a lot easier if it aligns with what your clients want. But, you know, the other thing that Justin mentioned earlier is PennDOT. You know, a lot of projects you see are stalled because half a mile down the road there's a red light and they want $300,000 worth of improvements there so that the traffic flow will work for them. And it's the first guy in the bucket that takes the big hit when it comes to the numbers. So the first developer in there, first 5 or 6 people involved, and everything down the road from there that's going to develop, you know, whoever starts building first is the one that's going to pay the payment. So that's another area that you have to consider.
Rick, can you talk about, you mentioned the township, so it goes under contract, you go to the township, you talk about uses, get permits, back and forth with land development, with zoning and all those things. You could have a deal go 2-3 years back and forth and
No.
then it fall apart and you get nothing.
The deal that she's talking about now, I think you put it under contract in 2021 or 2020,
April of 21.
21.
Mhm.
And
at the end.
extending it again to the end of July, hopefully to get to closing. I mean, a lot of the problem is too, is that we got all the approvals, we got everything to go through, but the market's changed. So when they put this under contract and what they had in mind to do with the property, it doesn't work anymore. So now they have these approvals. So what do you do with it? And even the seller will try to work with you because he knows he's going to have to go down this 3-year rabbit hole again. So, you know, that's the difficulty of that. It just takes a long time. And, you know, development deals, I've never seen anything close, you know, almost less than 2 years.
The reason I mentioned that, you know, we're all residential agents. We have a deal under contract for 45 days and it falls apart at the last minute and we're ready to commit Harry, right? They're doing it for years. So when Justin says, stay in your lane, he's trying to protect you. Right, Justin?
Yep.
All right. Anything else on valuations?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking.
Yeah.
So valuations, we're talking about here on the big scale with a lot of land development and bigger stuff, but even small commercial, it's about the income stream in most cases. You know, what can you do with this property? Sure, you have these property hoarders that'll buy anything to sit on them, but a more discriminating investor is going to look at what, you know, and lending, you know, what money comes in and does, do those numbers substantiate what you're asking for it?
So clients' needs. Melissa, you able to handle this one?
Sure.
How do clients' needs and expectations vary between commercial and residential?
So I think it's going to depend on your investors or your owners' experience, right? If it's the first time, definitely setting expectations on the time length, you know, and it can really vary, right? If it's a cut and dry deal, it could easily close in 60 days. But yeah, like Barb said, like 2-3 years, setting expectations to that client, like they're not getting it done in a year. And so trying to just help them, you know, guide them to say, hey, we're gonna be in this for the long haul. We're gonna become best friends. So I think that's a big piece on the lending side. Also kind of like what I talked about, flexibility. Hey, the underwriter's asking for this thing. I know you might not think it's important, but it is important for the deal. And so to try not to fight me on it because, you know, it's something that we need to get across the finish line.
Needs and expectations.
I'm not going to add.
Okay.
You had said earlier about you got a property under contract. Do you talk about listing contract or did you mean an executed contract? When you said you got a property, you have a property under contract, now you go to the township.
Right.
He was referring to
I-
me when I said listing.
Right.
Oh, for the listing. Okay. That's what I just wanted to be clear on because, yeah, you always go to the township before you do anything else. But one thing I do want to say, and this is really, I'm strongly encouraging. If you have a commercial person, a person that wants to get into commercial investing and buying, and they're brand new to the whole thing, be exceptionally careful. The reasoning why every little thing that they want to change, think, say, or do, please, please put it in writing, no matter what, not an email, not text message, because they will be the first ones that will attempt to try to sue you. If something goes downhill, you haven't experienced one, they know what the problems are, but the person that wants to get into this because they see gigantic dollar signs, yeah, they'll see them through you. Because all you have to do is do one little thing wrong with these newbies. But just the one thing I just want to stress, put everything, every date, every time you talk to them, because that'll come back and bite your face right off. You want to say the same thing?
I'm getting depressed. I don't know if I want to do this anymore.
He wants to get a job at McDonald's.
You're right.
So, Rick, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made in commercial real estate? Time to bare your soul.
We don't have a lot of time.
No, biggest,
The
not
biggest
all of them.
mistake I ever made was I listened to my broker, and when I first got into the business, not anybody in this room. And I had a $3 million contract on a retail development. It was 5 parcels of land. This was back in the mid 2000s. This 5 parcels of land took a long time to put together. Had a big developer out of Philadelphia, and they went through. They probably spent at least $750,000 going through the approval process, everything they had to do, including hard payments to my clients. Well, all of a sudden 2009 hit, and they just basically rang us up and said, we're done. And my broker never told me that I was supposed to put in there that in all hard money deposits, I get a percentage of that. So for 2.5 years, I worked on their behalf and didn't make a penny. My clients, on the other hand, made $500,000. And obviously they weren't very understanding when I asked for a portion of that. It wasn't in the contract. They lawyered up, and it was just, it was a mess. Because I specifically asked my broker, I said, can you tell me, is there anything we can, these people are going to get money. Why aren't we getting some of that? Because I was new. And he said, that's just not the way we do it. Well, I found out that's not true, but yeah, that was one of my worst experiences. There's been a few others too. Barbara?
Same thing. Only the funniest part about mine, I was really brand new to it. And when I did the listing contracts for 7 properties, and they were all lands, all 3 partners at the firm that I worked at made sure that I dotted my I's and crossed my T's until 2 years later when the buyer walked away and there was $200,000. They asked me why I didn't fill that line out. We're talking about seasoned 30-year people or plus. So yeah, the same exact thing. That's extremely important.
I've been careful and lucky. I think the worst thing I did was not manage the expectations of a client. We had a listing contract, got him more than he wanted on the property. I think maybe I made that look too easy. We got lucky, right? 2.5 years later, when the thing finally went to close, he had somehow forgotten the arrangement that we had, even though it was in writing. And there was some bad blood there because I collected on the commission that we had agreed upon. And there was a relationship spoiled because of it. And I think I regret that the most. I don't know if it was a mistake of not managing those expectations. I was just so damn happy to be in the room that, I probably could have pitched that a little bit better and been manage those expectations continually throughout that 2.5-3 year relationship, rather than just assume that because it was in writing, everybody had the same understanding. Well, that was silly.
Ask what you do with newbies. new clients who they wanna, like you said, they see big dollar signs and all of a sudden they're like, we wanna get involved in this deal, industrial, whatever it is, anything commercial.
You have to find out about all their financials, and that's not always easy to do because they're not always the honest. But while you're talking to them, do you have any other properties? Do you own your own house? That's extremely important. Or anything like that. Because you'll have a lot of them that says, I don't even have my own house. I rent an apartment, or I live with my brother-in-law or something. And it's like, most of your financial institutions are going to say they have no skin in the game. They're not going to care. So keep it small. And say, well, you could do this with this small little 4 or 5 house development, that needs to be fixed up, anything like that. Just start out something very, very small, but no matter what you do, like I said, the most important thing is date and time that you've ever spoken to these people, and not text and not an email, because they're going to want that at some point. Another thing is that with the newbies, you have to find out where their interests are. If they say, well, I like doing residential, or I like office buildings, and find out why. Why do they like these things? And then go from there. So just find out what they do, what they've done in their past. Have they been contractors? Have they had relationships with contractors? It's a history thing. You're digging in to find out all about them. So you can sit there and be creative, because that's what you're going to have to do, is be creative and say, this is what we need to do. And this is what I think is going to be best for you to start with your first one to do this. And at that point, they should be able to trust you.
She mentioned about checking into them, what they like to do. I know you mentioned this earlier before we started the Zoom about pre-approvals for commercial. In the residential world. We get a new person from Zillow or wherever. We're sending them to the lender to see, what kind of money they have. How can you assist us or assist a commercial agent with that?
Yeah. So on the commercial side, there's not like can I fill out an application here? The first thing I'm going to ask for is a personal financial statement. I don't need it to be it can be from another bank. I have a blank template that is an Excel sheet, which I like, because you can continue to add to it as your investor or your owner acquires more properties. That way they don't have to recreate the wheel. But yeah, having that communication with the real estate agent involved. That way they know exactly what you're working with. I mean, again, partnership, I feel like I talk about that all the time, but it really is important in commercial, especially between the lender and the commercial real estate agent, because how can they help the client if they don't even know what's going on with financials, just like Barb said. So that's definitely a big piece. I always say there's not really a thing like a pre-approval. I'll slap one together if that's what you need. I hate to say that. It's just that part of my job is to help you, ease of doing business. So I will put one together, but not until after I see the personal financial statement. We really prefer to see a letter of intent, and that's after the lender, puts together, they want to move forward. They've underwritten it. They've seen the personal financial statement. They've seen the bank statements. They're putting everything together, and they say, yeah, we actually want to do this deal. They're not going to waste their time. They don't want to waste their time, right? So they're not going to give a letter of intent if they don't actually want to do the deal. So I will say it is more work up front, which I know can be a little painful, especially if you're newer to commercial, because you're just used to getting a pre-approval, walking in the property and slapping together. I shouldn't say slap, putting together, a contract, right? But you really want to make sure that this borrower can actually buy, because again, like they've said, you don't want to waste your time. You don't get paid. We talked a little bit about mistakes. I've spent plenty of hours talking to people that don't actually want to buy commercial real estate. I learned that a lot in my first year. So it's great to talk to people, but make sure you actually have someone that has the money to buy and can put it together. Another thing that comes up is, oh, can I get a gift? Lenders don't really like gifts when you're buying commercial real estate, right? They want you to be serious. They want you to have skin in the game. They want you to own your own home. Doesn't mean we can't get the deal done. It's just the terms might not be as favorable. So all of those things that Barb said are exactly on point as far as digging in and making sure you've got a really serious buyer.
Our forms, are they pretty good with the commercial side of things? I know real estate or the residential side, the par forms seem really good, but what about the commercial side? In other words, the contingency for letter of intent, how long does that kind of thing take? Is that something that's spelled out in the par form?
I don't even use a par form for an LOI. No, I do for the contracts and they seem fine. I mean, a lot of spaces you'd like to be able to tweak and change it. Unfortunately, you can't do that. But yeah, par has, the fundamental forms I think are strong. Pardon me?
There's no PAR LOI, is there? Not
Not that I know of. I don't know.
No, no. They get the you have a different LOI?
Well, I get my letter of intent from the.
The realtor.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
No, she's talking about the LOI that we give to her. We create the LOI.
I thought it was like what the bank is willing to do. Say,
Yeah.
yes, I'll give you.
We'll call it a mortgage commitment.
I was gonna say, okay, it is different.
So big.
Yeah. An LOI for a purchase of it.
Yeah, our letter of intents, I guess, I don't know if you use them in residential, I'm not really sure. Basically, I like using them because it's 2 pages, 3 pages max. It fundamentally, maybe one, fundamentally spells out the terms of the deal and doesn't get into all the minutia. So I use them a lot, and that's the best way to go, I think, your first approach to a buy.
So letter of intent's a summary of, the meeting of the minds.
The
And that
commercial
letter-
terms, if you will, yeah.
Correct. And those letter of intents can go back and forth from one party to the next. Lots of scribbling,
Yep.
writing over them. But
Yep.
that's really the basis of an option agreement, which you'll see attorneys draw up, or the commercial agreement of sale,
Right,
right?
and they're non-binding. You have to keep
Correct.
that in mind. I mean, so typically you use them as just kind of a punch list. And
Non-binding, obviously that means that somebody else can swoop in. and
Yep.
provide
Absolutely.
Yep.
Once you get all your ducks in a row though with the LOIs, most of the time, what happens is that you're going right to contract at that point because everybody's agreed, this is how much you're paying and this is how much you're putting down, how much you're going to do a due diligence. Due diligence is very important. With residential, your due diligence is pretty much your inspection period. With commercial, it's a due diligence because you have to check everything out. So you have to make sure you get enough space and time. So get your due diligence, then you're going to go to contract with it. And it says, okay, we're going to do all this. You will also find out that in many cases, your commercial clients, your buyers are not going to put the money with your firm. They're going to put it with their lawyers. And that has to be spelled out too.
Option agreement, because we don't deal with those in residential. It's primarily, I've seen them on commercial deals, what an option agreement is, how it works, how it's different than our standard agreement of sale.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, you're talking about an option deal on when they're going to be doing things and what they have to do. So the
By their attorney, by the buyer's attorney.
yeah,
So you need an attorney to go through it because
we don't like them.
we don't, but we deal with them, right?
That's what makes you laugh is because the attorney makes the money from the moment you say hello to them and you do a lot of work and not get a dime for it. But yeah, the options that they all put in there is like when they can pull out. There's options as far as leasing is concerned. So you have a lease to purchase, or you're doing a lease and you have the option of like in 5 years' time to purchase the building, or you have an option. You wouldn't, as far as that maybe the tenants are concerned or something. In another year, they're going to have a raise in their their lease rates. So there's multiple types of options that you have, but in a purchase, it's pretty much they're going to do this and then they're going to do that, and the zoning has to be. And if they can't get that, then they have to go to an alternative way of trying to do something. And even as far as the financing is concerned, they'll go to their banks or whoever that they have a relationship with. And they'll say, well, I'm going to be getting money. We're going to pull it from my other properties. So you have a lot of different options that you have that the attorneys will pull out and do. If you do your job and you know what you're doing, you wouldn't have to face that because I still say that they get paid by the word.
Some of the common mistakes you see, Justin, you want to take this one to start? Common mistakes you see residential agents make when they dip their toes into the commercial side.
Oh, geez. Just oversimplifying it and treating it like a house. And everyone thinks that, land is easier than a house because there's no house on it. but it's so much more complicated because there's, you don't know, what has been done and what you can do. I mean, there's a whole lot of process that goes into it. I think Barbara really kind of has a great way of putting this. No, I mean, when we talked about a particular piece of land that was, a restaurant wanted to use, right? Um, they were a very simple consumer who was not necessarily sophisticated in their knowledge of the different processes that went into it. And, the state regulations, the township regulations, these things all evolve like weekly, right? So you think you know it all. I think that's the biggest mistake, is the assumptions that go into it, not knowing what you don't know. I think that's the biggest mistake, is not knowing what you don't know. Didn't know that there was a stormwater management plan. Didn't know that you needed to get the county conservation district involved for a soil and or an ENS plan, erosion and sedimentation. Didn't know that, there was all these hoops to jump through for a highway occupancy permit. Didn't know the ins and outs of the zoning. Maybe you were thorough enough to look at the zoning ordinance, but didn't realize that there was an extra 7 pages of particulars under subsection 255, because that was referenced in the fine print. And there's always fine print when it comes to zoning. And, Rick had a very good point. Talk to the township. What does the township want to do? Because they have an agenda. There's a piece of property outside of Carlisle, just over the South Middleton Township line, was a farmer's market. And it was condemned by the township when it burned partially. And it had been for sale before that. And it's a very appealing little piece of property, but unless you called the township, you wouldn't know that the township really wants retail there. And that the township is going to require whoever buys that property and puts in a subdivision plan for it to extend Pine Street out to rectify a troublesome intersection. So whoever buys that 2 acres is going to have to lose about a half an acre by putting a road there. Now, instead of 1 lot, they're going to have 2 lots. They're going to have to put in a street that's not just a driveway, right? You're not just building a driveway. You're building a street, which is a whole nother standard. You're putting in, a 4-way intersection. That's crazy money that you wouldn't have known just by looking at the MLS. So those are the mistakes, is just a failure of imagination at how many things can go wrong.
Basically, what we want to just tell you is that commercial is very complicated, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you want. We will work with you on whatever it is that you need. There's going to be times that we're going to have to tell you, saying this is going to be really out of your realm, and it's going to be very difficult. If you want to stay involved in it, just as a shadow of some sort, that's great. But some of these deals are very complicated, and we'll be happy to help and answer any questions that any of you may have at any time.
Here's one of the worst mistakes I ever saw.
What?
One of the worst mistakes I ever saw. Property listed for 1.3 million, and my clients were going to be owner occupants. They loved the property. They would have bought it in a second. And we were beating up the listing broker for the leases, because we wanted to know what we were in for. I don't care if there's no leases. I don't care if the property's totally vacant, because my guys wanted to eventually take over the whole property for themselves. We come to find out that the lower level is leased out to a machine shop for $4 a square foot. All right, it's under market, market would have been maybe $5 a square foot because of the low ceilings. No big deal. Until we get the final extension of the lease that he held back for weeks, and we see that there's 4 or 5 year extensions to this lease. So they could have been there for a full 20 years with no escalations at $4 a square foot. So what that means is, as rents go up over time, the value of this property goes down because of this sub-market lease. And the guy who wrote the lease, he's doing a lot of business. He's been selling $20 million of real estate every year for the past 30 years. But he was desperate to get something in here and he didn't pay attention and he screwed up that lease. And now this property 4 years later, still on the market, and it's just not going to sell because nobody's going to lend on it.
That's how I lost the deal with 2 office buildings. The owner of the 2 office buildings had auto renewals indefinitely.
Oh.
No. That's just as bad. But have Melissa, and how does financials look at that when they see that low leases with indefinite renewals?
Yeah, that's not going to help, right? Because they're going to look at the cash flow and that's indefinite. I mean, you're never going to be able to increase it. So,
As a tenant, I'm going to stay there forever.
right. Why,
Fuck this up.
why wouldn't you? Why would you leave? Why would you leave?
Yeah, it's
You have a question?
Actually, when you do a listing, how often do you include getting a percentage of the furniture sale? Like if the owner says, we're gonna keep all the personal property, how often do you put in there like, well, if you would decide to sell it, I want a percentage of that as well?
Can you repeat the question?
I'm sure.
When you take a listing, how often do you include that you want a percentage of any personal property or furniture that's sold?
I never.
Okay. Sorry, I have one more question.
It's not typical that we.
Okay. I almost ran into it with my last one. That's why I was curious.
we try to avoid that because that's like, let them deal with that. That's, you got enough on your plate with a commercial property than dealing with their furniture.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you comp out properties, how much weight do you put into the comps that you see versus the cap rate? Like, how do you ultimately determine price? Do you have a formula that you use, or is it just gut at this point?
Well, I mean, you have to be realistic with your client. I mean, you've got to let them, you've got to let them know, that this is what the market's going to bear. They may just decide to walk away. And I don't like to put things under listing that I can't sell. I mean,
Sure.
well, a lot of people like signs, and I don't mind them, but again, I just want to have a realistic opportunity to sell it. So cap rates, they've really, we've taken it. We actually listed a property last year where the client was going to do a sale leaseback, and they wanted to dig up some funds for the property. It's a $5 million property. He wants to do another expansion out in Pittsburgh. So when we listed it, the interest rates were pretty good. And now 6% cap rate isn't even going to get a look. So you've got to be realistic with it. And, we look at the comps and we hope that they'll work out to where they're supposed to be if it's a rental or something like that. But sometimes you just got to walk away.
Thank you.
What are people looking for in cap rate nowadays?
Depending upon the type of property. If you're looking at residential, probably over 10. Because the variance in length of tenant. But commercial, they want 8s at this point. And it's tough for sellers to allow that, so that's kind of what I'm seeing at this point. I'm hoping with the interest rates going back down and everything that's supposed to happen this year, we'll have a different outlook on that. But yeah, 2 years ago, 6% was great. I mean, in national tenants, they were going for 4s. I don't know why, but they were going for 4s. That's a lot of 1031 money somebody has, I think.
I have a discussion on cap rate.
When I was doing appraisal work, my mentor appraiser, he said, I want you to think of cap rate interchangeably with risk, and it's risk rate. So the riskier the investment, the higher the cap or the capitalization on that property should be. I've got residential properties that I have to go collect the rent in person because those tenants don't have checking accounts. I expect 15%. There's the downtown Carlisle post office is in a leased building. That's about 5% because it's better than a savings bond. They're not going anywhere, right? There's zero risk. The roof leaks, the tenant fixes it. It snows, they plow it. That's not a problem. There's no risk. And so the lower the risk, the lower the rate. The higher the risk, the higher the rate. The more work you put into it, the more the cap rate should be. So that's, Home Depot, It's like you're just going to pick up the mailbox money.
Well, and I think that goes back into knowing your client, right? Knowing what they like, knowing their risk tolerance, knowing what kind of properties they like, I mean, even as I'm an investor, my husband and I have a number of properties, and what we like, nobody else likes. We really like the diamonds in the rough because my husband likes to do all the work, and he's okay with collecting rent in cash, but because it comes every month and they're never leaving. So
Right. And Barb said, except for Rite Aid.
yeah,
Right. Right. Yeah.
But they're, CVS not going bankrupt, but they're changing a lot. So that's something else that I'm actually looking at because, oh, sorry. The CVSs are going to start closing, but they're opening up as urgent cares, and their pharmacy is only going to be a drive-through. So they're doing some changes, but I don't know if that affects their lease. It shouldn't, but we don't know how their lease is written up. They're like the best in the whole world.
Their lease rates and terms are terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
They like to open up in unusual spots,
Yeah.
like in the middle of nowhere.
And, it's so exciting. It was so exciting in college.
Yeah. Yeah.
One
So-
other thing that popped into my head while we were talking about things is that you got to remember too, in these lease terms, there's all kinds of leases. There's gross leases, modified gross, triple net, double net, and none of it means the same thing to other people. Triple net, there is no, that should be definitively, you do nothing. You get mailbox money every month, but so you got to be very careful when they say double net. Who knows what that means? I mean, does that mean you have to pay a pro rata share of taxes? Are you just paying your utilities? Is there a CAM charge in there? I mean, so you got to really pay attention to the type of lease that you're signing. I mean, I like to do modified gross, and there's, you can be very specific. But again, triple net means different things to different people.
Rick and Barb, do you have any commercial designations?
No, just broker. I was going to get back into I was going to start the CCIM right before the pandemic, and that didn't work out.
Explain what CCIM is.
It's certified commercial investment member, and basically the designation it means something. It's probably the problem with real estate licensure is there's nothing for the commercial side of the business. Really, it's a very small portion of your instruction, as you well know. So I thought maybe I'd get into the broker license and maybe I'll get more. Well, you don't. And so you look CCIM, there's probably 10% of commercial brokers are CCIMs, and it takes a year. It's really a pretty difficult process to go through and costly as well.
Yes.
I suppose so. I don't know what the master's in real estate is.
The coursework for CCIM was,
The coursework for CCIM was similar to the coursework that I had to take for my appraiser trainee license. I mean, it's in depth, but then the experience required and the coursework is all so much more thorough and exhaustive. I mean, it's really, if somebody is carrying a CCIM, they're the real deal. And everyone, I think, knows it. Do you know any CCIMs that aren't worth the label? Okay.
There's also SIOR.
Yeah.
It's true. And everything that we do, doesn't matter what business it is, it doesn't matter. You're going to have some people that you're looking at them going, you're serious. You actually have a CCIM. You have a real estate license too? But that will happen in any business that you are, no matter what. There's SIORs. If I'm not mistaken, also, you have to pay a very large fee every year for holding your CCIM and SIRs too.
It's like $900.
Yeah. Every course you take will be.
$900.
do you ever see a residential agent with those designations?
You can't.
No, you can't. You
Yeah.
can't take it unless you're actually, doesn't somebody have to actually sponsor you?
Yeah, and you have to have you have to have commercial transaction credits.
Yeah. X amount, some years.
Yeah.
And you do a master's package, you do like a package of like, I think it's like 10 transactions. They all have to be, you have to do a case study of each of those transactions. So it's like, it's, yeah.
Yeah.
SIOR actually has six classifications underneath that you can kind of
Yes.
focus in on office or industrial or,
Uh-huh.
something like that, real estate management. So they're not, one's not better than the other, they're just different.
Hi, I was just wondering, or better said, if I want to look for off-market properties, commercial properties, do I also look into that, what you said earlier, CoStar? Because I think LoopNet, I already visited the website like sometime, and I think it's only active listings, but how would I find those?
They'll tell you that a property is off market, but it had to have been on the market at one point. But it'll say right on there. But CoStar, you have to belong to, you have to have a license for it. And it's a little over $500 a month. So you have to have it. Correct, so you get the free account, but again, as Rick said, it really doesn't give you very much. And that's $275 a month. So, but yeah, if you're looking for off-market things, it's going to be difficult.
Get on the phone.
Yep. If you're in Dauphin County, look at Dauphin County property info and see who owns what, where, when, how long, and don't expect it to be accurate all the time either. It's better than some other counties. Didn't you tell me Cumberland County is pretty tough?
Yeah, I think Dauphin's much better.
Yeah.
York's very, yeah, the tax site is tough.
All right, Melissa, why is commercial lending so much more complicated than residential?
Great question. So with residential, and you were talking about this earlier, they try to really streamline things, right? You know, if you qualify for this loan, then you follow these things. But with commercial, it's very property dependent. It's very investor dependent. You know, they have to take a look at the whole picture. A big part of my job is packaging the deal up and almost selling it and making it pretty and telling the lender why they should do it. I'm not saying that they don't look at the numbers, right? That's obviously the numbers have to make sense, but also, you know, why should this investor take on this loan? And does it fit their portfolio and what they like? I was kind of talking to you earlier that they may not lend on a property because it's too rural. I run into that all the time, especially in South Central Pennsylvania. So it's a matter of, for me, trying to find the lenders that I know their appetite, I know what they like, I know what property they like, types they like, you know, even loan amounts. Some lenders, they won't even do, you know, less than 500,000. So just being able to navigate, again, which lender is going to do what. So it's taking a look at the borrower, it's taking a look at the property, the cash flow, the whole picture. It's not just, oh, well, we can do this loan because.
The no doc loan, it sounds simple, no doc. What do you need on a no doc?
Yeah, so no doc loans. I have not done one, and I haven't even seen really them be around, you know, until like prior to COVID, they were a little bit, but since then, not really. What I will say is some of the lenders that I work with, some of the deals actually are very limited doc. You know, they might need only 6 or 7 documents. So it's not that painful. Sometimes it depends on obviously the deal, right? So we try to make that as painless as possible. And again, it's going to come down to what type of loan.
So is private money lending a thing with commercial? You dealing with that at all?
I have not.
Hard money lenders, anything like that? No. Venture capitalists?
They are outrageous.
Mhm.
I'm not being
So I was gonna say, I definitely have hard money lenders. They call them private money now. They are expensive. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They're 12, 14, 16, 18%, right? But it's supposed to be a short-term loan. It's a bridge loan. Yeah, some of them are prepayment penalty. It just depends. So again, though, if you need to get the deal done quickly and you know, and you only need it for a short period of time, it can be a great product. It just really depends on what the end goal is.
time, as long as you have a proven history with them?
Experience is always going to help, right? But as always, if you have a new investor, how do they get experience? Well, they have to do one. So they might have to do one at 14% for the first one, right? To get it under their belt. They want to look at the last 3 years is what they look at generally. I mean, obviously if you've got this long history, right? But they want to see at least, 2 or 3 deals in the last 3 years from what I've seen.
I think one of the things with lending is on the residential side, everybody's protecting the residential consumer from the sharks that are out there. In commercial, they're assuming that you're a shark, and there's no sense protecting sharks from sharks.
You can't get gifts.
There is an organization that when you have your newbies, check them out. They're called Community First Funding. Especially if they're going to be owner users. They're not generally for investors. It's going to be for an owner user. Check them out. They are very good. They don't have the outrageous loan requirements in some, but they do work in conjunction with a bank. Because what they do in many cases, and I haven't worked with them for probably about 10 years, is the normal 20% that someone has to put down. They will lend up to the 15%. The interest rate's a tad bit higher. So if it's 7, they could be charging you 8. There are fees involved, but they're not outrageous fees. They're very, very good. And I recommend them very much when your newbies are around. But they have to have a relationship with the bank. So that's pretty much it, but check them out. They're very good. I'd forgotten about them.
So a couple more questions and then we'll get you off the hot seat. How long is a typical commercial loan? How long a process is that? I know there's nothing typical, right?
It depends on I hate to say that. That's always my answer, right? It depends because it really does depend. I mean, I've done rate and term refinances. Like I've got one right now. It's an investment property. It cash flows. We're paying off a hard money lender, right? So the loan is coming due and the owner just needs to do a rate and term refinance. I mean, we're doing that in 30 days or less, right? But again, it depends, right? We talked about the land deal earlier. That takes a while. Sometimes if we're doing SBA, that can take 6 months, maybe longer. It really depends on the property and everything. And that's the fun part of commercial, but it's also like the stressful part, right? Because you can't ever predict it. And so it's a matter of what are you working with? How organized is your borrower? Does the property cash flow? Where is it located? Does the investor have the appetite? All of that.
Something we didn't talk about is in my 30 years, I've been in business for 30 years. Every time I went to borrow money, I had to give a business plan. So what do you do with the business plan? To talk about that, what goes into it? Why do you need it? Do you really pay attention to it or you throw it in the trash? Because I put endless hours into telling them, this is what I'm going to do to borrow money. And because I'm a newbie, right? It's a brand new business. I'm leasing this space. I'm not buying it. And this is what I want to do. I want to open this business. And how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So great question. Again, it depends, right? I don't deal with a lot of startups. That's just not where my investors are at. But that's a great opportunity for me to maybe, refer them to another lender. But the business plans, the business plans are important though. And especially when we're looking at a new investor, again, that's part of the package. What is the game plan? And okay, yeah, you've always dreamed of having a restaurant. Okay, cool. Like what's the plan? Do you, for the SBA loans that we work on, what is your resume? They do require the resume as part of the SBA loan, right? So what is your background? You've always wanted to own this restaurant, but like, have you ever cooked? Have you ever bartended? Have you ever run the books? I mean, that's another thing that we see all the time too. We see people and entrepreneurs who are passionate about their trade or their craft, right? And then they want to go buy a building, and although that's fantastic, and I encourage that, that doesn't mean that you can just do it. You do have to have a plan. There's a lot of free resources out there that can help you create a business plan in this community. So that's another thing that I try to advise. Hey, you might not be ready yet for what I can provide, but why don't you go get a business plan? And have you really thought about this? And do you know that, if you're going to run a restaurant, you're going to have employees and workers' comp, and are you going to offer benefits? All of those things go into that. So, and again, not asking you as the real estate agent to know all of these things. You're going to learn some of this stuff, but you do have to look at that whole picture, especially, even leasing, right? We have a commercial space open and, someone approached my husband and he said, oh, he wants to open up a restaurant. I said, where's the business plan? I actually want to see it, because just because you want to do it doesn't mean that you can and should. So I think that they can be very important. And that's part of that whole conversation of like, is this person prepared? Does this business owner have what it takes?
I think that's important for real estate agents. If you're going to work with someone that wants to get into business, that's the first question you ask them. You're not getting a pre-approval, but show me your business plan. Does it make sense? Or are you going to waste time showing them 22 properties that they have no idea what they're going to do? So-
Even just multifamily and residential or rentals, right? Are you going to buy and hold? Are you going to flip? Are you going to have a property manager? Are you going to manage it yourself? Who's going to do the repairs? Do you have a list of contractors? I mean, those are all things that are important. I had a client close today on a 4-unit, right? And it's his first investment property. And I said, hey, just so you know, like you should get another bank account. Do you know that? And I shouldn't have to have that conversation, but from Melani's standpoint, he was a little bit messy as far as his finances, mixing things. And I was like, hi, like you really should get another bank account. Those are just simple things, but.
That we talk about with our real estate agents. They want to start an LLC because their real estate business, they're starting to collect income. Under that is another checking account. What's your business plan? What are you going to do with it? What's your budget? So your real estate business is a business, much like they're talking about. So
another thing that we see oftentimes is like, and you were talking about earlier with cap rates and you can't make the numbers work. Some of these properties are listed too high and they can't make the numbers work. And that means they're bad investments. So just so you know, I know people get hungry and they got to get their first investment, but sometimes the numbers don't work and you can't fix that. Like if the rent isn't there and it costs too much, you can't pay the mortgage. So
you can always raise the rent. That's what it says in the listing, right?
yeah.
It's undervalued. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can always, I always ask the question, if you can always raise the rent, right? Then why is the landlord selling? Right? If it's such a great investment at those numbers, why is the landlord selling? Anyway.
Questions. I only have one more, but it was, what are the standard requirements needed to obtain financing? I think you
It
talked
depends.
about that. Yeah, it depends. Good answer. That is the phrase of the day.
Am I wrong though?
Nope.
Something too. Your job as a real estate agent, your job is to sell real estate. And you can advise these people until the cows come home. If they've got money and they want to buy a property, even though you strongly recommend that they should not do it. And any lawyer will tell you, just write up a piece of paper, both sign it. It's against your professional advice, but you sell them the property. I was fortunate enough to have someone that told me that years and years ago when I first started out. And I did that because there was a couple that had a lot of money. They inherited money and they needed very little financing. And I said, you lose one tenant, you're done for. And they were like, no, it's a great neighborhood. I'm sure it'll be great and everything else. 6 months later, they came back and tried to say that I sold them something that I shouldn't have. And then I reminded them by showing them the copy of the paper that they signed that it was against my professional advice, my medical advice. Too much of a parent to do this. But they came back 6-8 months later and they went right to my brokers. They didn't even come to me. They went right to my brokers and said that I lied to them and everything else. So yeah, your job is to sell real estate. You can tell them not to buy something. They got the money, you sell it to them.
Not a bad idea.
Any closing,
You and your clients both should be familiar with APODs. That's the best way to start with anything is your annual property operating data. It gives them all the expenses, income, everything that comes in. It's there in black and white. It's on 2 pages and my clients love them. They're very helpful. That's all I got.
Anybody else? Justin, you want to close it up?
be careful.
My only request is, utilize me as a resource. It doesn't cost you anything to call me. So if you have a deal, you want to just talk about it, say, hey, will this work? Or, hey, I have this client. They went to their local bank because they had a relationship, but they can't seem to do it. Just call me. We do rescue deals all the time. Sometimes even a week before closing.
Just from kind of what we were saying back here. So it sounds very scary.
That was Justin's
So,
prerogative.
yes. Intriguing, but very layered, very just, yeah, a little scary. So what are the pros? Like, what's your favorite part about doing commercial versus residential?
I'll give it then, but for me, I just like the creativity and the fact that every deal is different and you just don't get bored. And I just think in general, commercial real estate is just really fun to see. I love interacting with commercial, realtors because they're essentially changing, like, especially if they're getting tenants in and they're retail, right? You're changing what's going on in the community and who you're bringing in. So it's really fun to see that happen. And it's fun to be a part of knowing, at least for me, like I financed that, or, that client got denied a week before closing and yeah, we had to extend, but we still got it done. So that's been really rewarding for me. And I also just love talking to investors and telling them, yeah, you can do this. Like, it just takes one property, the first one.
I got into it in service of my existing clients and community, because a lot of the big Harrisburg firms looked at Carlisle real estate as basically pasture, and no one would like even show up to look at anything. So, I thought that there was something to be done there. Got into commercial appraisal, and like residential agents walk down the street and don't even see the commercial real estate. Commercial real estate agents walk down the street, don't even see houses. Everybody's missing half the market, and that was, I understood value differently after doing commercial appraisal work. So it was just interesting to me. And I thought that my clients could use it rather than sending them away to somebody who didn't even want to really talk to them.
For me, it is the creativity. You can look at something and see a future, and you can be part of it. I'm not the nicest person in the world. So residential to me would be, you better be very on top of everything, because if I have to scold you for something, you're going to be burned to the ground. So commercial people they're used to this stuff. They know, and you have to be tough with them, and you can't be thin skinned, because in this business, they'll cremate you before you're dead. So yeah, but you could look at stuff and you could bring people together. We were actually working on something that was pretty far away, but it was a matter of bringing together all different types of groups to make that entire area be progressive, because they have gone down to being close to like a third world country. But it was just bringing everybody together and saying, okay, put your 2 cents in. I'd like to hear what you think. What can we do? What can I do to help you? So that's pretty much it.
It's not rocket science, let's face it. I mean, it's real estate. So all the fundamentals are pretty much the same. It's just, you have to pay more attention to details. And so I didn't want to get involved in the residential emotional buy. I don't want to pick paint colors out and countertops. I mean, that's just never anything I wanted to do. So a friend of mine actually got me into commercial, and it was with Bennett Williams initially. And so I learned a lot. And the satisfying thing when it happens, doesn't happen a lot often enough right now, but is when the deal comes together, when you're kind of going through all the steps and you're becoming successful. You find ways to make things successful. The developer can't do something, he can't bring the money to the table, but maybe we can talk to the owner and do a JV, a joint venture, where they put up part of their real estate, and they can make more money at the end of the day. And those kind of creative deals are fun to me. So that's pretty much what I enjoy.
Mainly so when I drive by something, I can say I sold that.
Yeah. And my wife doesn't care.
My kids do. My kids do. All right.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Nice meeting you.
Thanks everybody for showing up, and just give this the respect it deserves. Thanks for paying attention. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Barb. Thanks.